Okay, welcome. Welcome everyone. This today is May 20th, 2025. We're sitting here on the internet with Raynella Fontenot for the Language Keepers interview series. This interview is using the UK contracting system, so Raynella will own the rights to this recording, and will be licensed to be put on the YouTube page publicly, and then also on the Language Keeper interview series website. So I guess without further ado, thank you so much, Raynella, for joining us today. And I'm wondering if you could start off by telling me a little bit about who you are, kind of just giving your life story in 5 to 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay, well, of course. Thank you. And thank you, Haley, for inviting me to join this series. And you spoke a little bit about the work that you're doing, and I find that very admirable. And I wish you the best of luck for all of the rest of your project goals. So, hello, everyone. My name is Raynella Fontenot, and I am an enrolled member of the Coshada Tribe of Louisiana. The name of our language is Kwasadi, which also is the name of our people. And I am from the Beaver Clan, and I come from a very strong, uh, our language, sorry, cut that out. I come from a very traditional family with very strong language ties. So when I speak about that, it's basically my family unit as we were growing up. My parents very strictly enforced and instilled the language. And so we would attend public school, and when we came home, they would constantly remind. I don't know if it was more so me. I think I took to English, and it was something new, and I love learning. And so I immersed myself in the English language. I learned, of course, all the sentence structures, all the um, what nouns and pronouns. And as a little child, that was all new and exciting for me. Um, and I think I took toward that because I'm not a very good math person, but I did have a very strong family encouragement throughout my adolescence. And so when I would come home, they would say, you need to speak Kosari. They would say, speak Indian, which in our language it would sound like a tumadnashi, like that was a command saying speak Indian. You're and basically letting me know I'm at home. I'm to be speaking my language, and so they would constantly remind me. And because of that, I think that helped me become um, or stay a fluent speaker even though I moved away, several times after high school, and I attended college and different things. It actually helped me realize how important language was within our community, within my family. And so um, after high school, I attended college. And then later, I married into the Fontenot family where I have four children. And so I'm able to so they are homeschooled. And so my children are immersed in the Kwasadi culture. And so we have been working on language acquisition at home. And sometimes it's quite challenging because I'm balancing now that I'm a full-time working mother and they're homeschool, and also everything that comes with modern living. So, of course, we all know we live in a fast-paced world. Everything's moving toward technology. Now we have to consider artificial intelligence when it comes to language and protecting our language. But back to my family. So as a family, including my siblings, my nieces, my nephews, my children, we've endeavored to continue and teach the language and share all of our culture at home and beyond the home. So that includes traditional dances. We'll go and do demonstrations for anyone that requests or invites us over. We'll do basketry. Um, instruction, or we'll do basketry. I guess go teach into the school systems of who we are as Kwasati people, talk about our basketry traditions, and then any of our history and education that is pertaining to the tribe itself. Um, and going back, sorry, I feel like I'm going all over, but
Okay.
um, I had it all bulleted out just because I will get off topic like that. So I'm looking at my bullet points and I'm like not even following that. But
We're not,
so
we're not in a rush. If you need to go back and talk about stuff that you missed, we're fine with that.
should I start back over and start like
I think you're I think so far is good. I think if you feel like there's a point that you missed and you wanted to add it back in,
okay,
we're all listening and following with you. So like we're locked in.
okay, okay. So a little bit more about me. I prior to starting my family, I attended school to become a phlebotomist and a medical technologist. So I became a phlebotomist first and then was working toward a degree in medical technology. And I was able to work in a medical laboratory for 5 years. And there was a transition that I had, and I also had a desire to contribute back to my community. And so, for reasons that I wonder now, and I think it was all orchestrated, that I applied for a position at the Coshada Police Department, which is a completely different field. And so I applied, I gained the position. And so I actually went to the law enforcement academy in Calcasieu Parish. So I got my um, certificate. I was a certified police officer, I think. So I graduated that. And so I continued working there. And that's where I met my husband. My husband was an officer there. And um, shortly after, we got together. We started a family, got married, got started a family. And during that time, I left the PD because we decided together that it was not wise for both of us to be in danger. And so I decided, yeah, I'll be a stay-at-home mom for some time. And I did that for probably 10 to 12 years, if that. And I did start homeschooling my daughter during her kindergarten years. And she went to Little Indian School. My first child went to Little Indian School, which is our preschool here on the reservation. And they serve the 3 and 4 year olds. They teach them the fundamentals that you would have at a regular um, early education center. And they also incorporate the language and the culture. So I knew that I wanted my child there. And after she graduated at 4, she was ready to move on to what they would call big school. And so I decided, um, or we decided as a family, that the local schools may not meet our needs. And so we decided, let's just homeschool and see how that works. And we never left homeschooling. All of my kids were all um, brought into homeschooling. And I still have children still homeschooling, but that allowed me to bring them with me at different events. So I am able to bring them to workshops and festivals and conferences, when appropriate, when I can bring them. They get to see me working within the culture and the language. And my hope is that they gain all of that knowledge, or, they're paying enough attention to be able to absorb that and also share that. Now, I feel like being an example for them is something that um, I feel like maybe could benefit other groups that if they have the opportunity to have that sort of environment, is to share that through having the children watch you do it, and then in turn when their time is coming, so like my children, they help me do presentations now, and so they'll share some of our traditional oral stories, they'll do their traditional dances, and so in that way, I'm hoping that perpetuating that culture and language through teaching others is going to help them gain the confidence, gain the knowledge, and all of the things that might benefit them for their future endeavors, whether they decide to stay within the community and help with language or help with um, whatever it might be within the tribe. I'm just hoping that having that foundation, and homeschooling has allowed me to do that, as well as um, helping teach language at home. Now, it can be a little bit more challenging just because, of course, a lot of the texts that we have to use in science, we don't have words for some of these. Um, you know, we don't really have a word for computer. Now we can actually create one, but we haven't really made a word, just the word computer or internet. So there's new ideas, and I believe that language is always evolving. It's very organic, and so as we grow as people, so does our knowledge base, and so does our language. And so with that, sometimes we do have to create words, and that would, to me, have to be a community decision to incorporate new ideology and new words into saying, hey, let's come up with a new word for this. And um, and of course, there's a lot of consensus, pros and cons to that. And we've managed to create new words, oh, in the past years, but we haven't had any new words that we've created. So I'd like to see that um, in a certain way, if they're comfortable with creating new words. If there is a way to do that, then, we would absolutely um, cherish those discussions. So I I am currently employed as the Coshada Tribal Archivist. Um, so my employment began in 2017. Um, the summer of 2016, I was actually, prior to 2016, there was a language workshop. And since I had young children, I wanted to figure out how best to teach my kids, even though that was not the same way I was taught, because growing up, whenever I was taught, I was taught from birth. So it was just full immersion. And so becoming from a tribal and non-tribal parents, I wanted to figure out the best ways and approaches to teach young children, because, there's new data, there's new research, and new approaches to teaching. And so I thought, well, let me take this class. And I took it. I enjoyed it. And then went back to homeschooling. And in the summer of 2016, I was asked to help teach the first language immersion class. And this class was allowing our students, I would say, eighth grade up to college level. So it was a very distinct group, our age group. And that was set that way because the immersion class, once finished and tested, they would receive college credit through McNeese State University. So I think their criteria, they had lined everything out. We had a linguist that helped develop the program, and we had about 7 students that made it through the entirety of the class. You'll see some, you may have like 12 students you start out with, and over time, if it became difficult, you'll see it dwindle down, which is kind of a normal thing in that kind of setting. But the following year, in 2017, the May of 2017, I was asked to formally join the Coshada Heritage Department. And so they asked me to help with language revitalization. And so I chose to come on part-time. And through there, I've transitioned through different roles, responsibilities, and job titles. And so it's um, it's been quite a journey, and I've learned a lot. I've gained a lot. I've had a lot of good mentorship. I've met a lot of knowledgeable people that I could have leaned on, that I could have learned from. Because the way I see things personally is that I may have a very large knowledge base, but there's always more that I can learn. I could, you know, learn better language skills or better teaching skills. I never stop learning. I'm in a perpetual state of learning, and I feel that that's something that will stay with me or needs to stay with me till I've left this earth. And so I, excuse me, let me pause for.
No worries.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I would say with throughout all of the different roles and the exposure to different responsibilities, because I've actually worked with language revitalization, worked with the culture. I've actually had spent some time working through Section 106 in NAGPRA and the Trouble Historic Preservation. I've worked in um, archival, which I am right now currently, but I also worked with being the director when they transitioned to the Department of Cultural, Historical, and Natural Resources. So when they transitioned to that and I was selected to be the director, I also had to learn environmental and natural resources. So I've had quite a interesting, um, I would say, like going to school and learning different things that necessarily didn't tie into my original um, job title or position because I was essentially brought on to be a language teacher. But here, I think there's so many things that encompass our language, the culture and language, in my opinion, cannot be separated. So all of those things intertwine. And so it was just a natural progression of my learning and education. In helping my community. And so I even had a small time within the enrollment department, and I learned the laws there and helped. Our enrollment director had passed away, and then the assistant enrollment director was still there, but she had to transition home to care for an elderly father, and so they trained me there. So even through there, I learned a lot. I learned about some of the more intricate details about our enrollment processes, and also about the family lines and the family trees. Even though I had some knowledge of that, it just kind of instilled more within like family groups and how that connected or interconnected as well. And so through all my roles, I feel like in the time before my employment with the Kashada tribe, I feel like I've accomplished many of my life goals, but I continue to aspire and set new goals, and um, that's something I teach my children is, to never stop growing, to never stop setting and reaching your goals. Um,
Sorry, quick question. You haven't mentioned it. How old are your children now? Your four children?
okay. Yes, I have my four children. I have three girls and one boy. I really wanted a son, so um, we kept trying until I had a boy. But I don't know if we would have had any more if the fourth one was not a boy. But my oldest, she's 18. She recently turned 18. Well, actually, I say recently. That was last August. And then, um, and then I have a 17-year-old. She just turned 17, which was in April, and she's currently the Kashada princess. And
Congrats.
her reign will, thank you, her reign will end in July. And then my third daughter, she's 13, and she's currently the Kashada Junior Princess.
Oh,
But and she will continue her reign for a second year. It
oh,
just so happens that it worked out, and she's just going to continue her reign for another year.
that's
And
awesome.
then my youngest is my son, and he's 11. So,
Are
and
you
I
still? Okay.
Sorry, I didn't think to mention that earlier.
And so your oldest, I'm imagining, has graduated or will graduate. Are you still currently homeschooling all of them, or has the oldest one moved out into to college yet?
Not yet. She is graduated, but we our plan at the moment, which we had begun and we had not been able to finish, was um, and somehow we fit it in, but we were going to flight school. So we were learning to be, that was just something fun. But for my daughters, it was more of a career path for them. And so they wanted to learn helicopters, which is considered rotor wing. And so we were taking classes. And so then we had to put a pause on that and we're looking for a new school. So I think her plan is to finish out her flight education and then figure out her goals from there because she originally wanted to be an engineer. And I think maybe the idea of branching out on her own was very daunting. And I
Mhm.
could be wrong, but from a mother's perspective, I can see and that it might have been overwhelming, but I think she's slowly trying to figure out where she fits into, you know, her future goals and life. And so I think her first step is to take on flight education, finish that, and then from there figure out what she'll do next because um, there's a need for pilots and that can be a great career path and so we as a family as a parent or as parents we encourage them. We've never really discouraged them from reaching their goals and dreams and I happen to be taking it just because um, years back my daughter they had a Easter egg drop and they had a helicopter fly over and they dropped all the Easter eggs and then all the kids would run and go gather as many eggs as they could and so it
Wow.
was a free for all but afterwards my they allowed a few flights they took a few of the tribal members to um, just around the local reservation just a small fly over. And so my youngest, who's now the Kashada Junior Princess, she's like, Mom, she was really young then. She was, I want to go. So I'm like, okay, well, we'll go sign up and see if they have room for us. And so we were the last flight. She absolutely loved it. And from then, I thought, this sounds like a fun job. And I thought, I considered it for a moment, but with all of the duties of homeschooling and I still had very young kids, which were in little Indian school, I decided it was not a great time to attend flight school. And so it came up last year that my daughter decided she wanted to become a pilot. So, not my oldest, but my second, who is 17 now, she decided she wanted to become a pilot and she wants to be able to fly everything. And so, we're looking at her to attend Louisiana Tech when she graduates, but she's wanting to get because you can get a pilot's license or a student pilot's license at 16 and you can start your education.
Wow.
It's crazy.
No.
So it is very interesting and eye opening in some ways because um, it's very intimidating to fly helicopters, and I I enjoy it. Which we've gotten a little bit of flight time in, we've gotten a little bit of ground school, but I've enjoyed it. But my girls definitely want to finish, and we're just trying to figure out where to go next as far as education for flight school. And so I if it all works out, I know my two girls will finish, but if it all works out, I'll be able to finish as well. If not, I'll be promoting them more to finish. But so my oldest wants to do flight school first, then figure out what she'll do next. And but my second daughter, who's going to graduate next year, is definitely going to be. She wants to be a female Indigenous pilot, and
Oh.
so she wants to be able to fly commercially, privately. She wants to fly everything, and so um,
So I guess I don't know much about flying, but you're saying that there's a difference between like the license that you get, where you can start to get as a student when you're 16 to like fly things. That's different than a pilot's license that she would be going to school for, or
so you begin off with a student license,
Mhm.
and so all of that's regulated through the FAA.
Okay.
And so when you apply for that, you know, you're still considered a student. And so you're only allowed um different things, like so you can't fly alone, you know, there's different safety precautions and requirements included in that. And
Kind of
so
like experiment.
yes, it
Okay.
is. And then, you know, you slowly graduate as you gain more experience and knowledge, and you test for these things. Once you pass your test, you can get, you know, um a pilot license, but it still comes with kind of limited things that you can do. Like you may not be able to fly in certain situations, or you know, you have to graduate as you go, because it's considerably more dangerous, of course, than driving. Although they say flying is safer, but when you're the pilot, you know,
Yeah.
it's your life. So, you know, they have a lot of considerations when it comes to licensing. So, and if you ever looked at they call it the FAR AIM, which is the book, the laws. It's pretty thick and intensive. And
Yeah.
so, um, there's a lot of things that also changed after 9/11. So it used to be thinner, and now it's thicker, but it's all for the safety of the pilot, the safety of you know, everyone. So um, I think that when they get, my daughter wants to become, so part of that licensing is when you get to a commercial license, I think you can fly other people, and then privately you can charter private flight plans, I would say is the
Mhm.
best way to describe that.
Okay.
And um, I'm still learning it all too, so I may have kind of mixed something up, but that's my understanding of it all.
Didn't mean to
So
derail you. Yeah.
go ahead.
I didn't mean to derail you. I was just kind of confused on.
Oh no. It gets asked a lot, and whenever we started, I had a better grasp on it, but we haven't been focusing on our flight education. So I've kind of like I have to retrain, not retrain my brain, but like um reactivate that part of my brain and like recall all that information.
Yeah.
So
It sounds like you guys are rife for putting like for coming up with some of those words for some of these flight terms within Kawasaki, or if like that's something y'all have been struggling with or thinking about.
um we've thought about it. But because of the way FAA guidelines are, I mean, we can talk on the radio, but like for um, flight towers and such, you know, we would have to use the regulated
Mm,
codes or commands, or incoming transmissions.
mm,
But internally, we could essentially use our language to have private conversations if we chose to, because is cross traffic sometimes over the radios. But I've come to find out that pilots have it's a very small community, and they all won't know one another, and so they will have conversations randomly. And um, at first, listening to it, I had no clue what they were talking about, but you know, getting used to it, being um, in the air and hearing all of that, you know, you start getting acclimated to that. But um, Speaking on um, language, we already have words for airplane just because um, I guess I don't know when it was created, but basically our word for airplane is pithoeka, which just means a flying boat. And so a lot of our words are descriptive. They essentially describe what's happening or the object. Um, Another example would be like palke, which is the word for train, and palke just means fast. And so it's very interesting and endearing to hear some of the words that were not around historically, but have they've adopted words. And so those are a few of the words that I can share with you at the moment. Um, and I think that's it on that, unless you have any other questions.
No, thank you so much. I feel like the your daughter's goal of being this indigenous pilot is just it's really it's really telling for your time spending in homeschool that it's not just that she wants to be a female pilot or a pilot, but she wants to be an indigenous pilot. It sounds like a lot of the work that you do with language and culture in yourself you've instilled within your children. And that takes a lot of thanks for doing that, first of all, and making the world a better place. But then also like it's thank you because it's not easy. I'm imagining like that it didn't accidentally happen. You had to spend some time, and it was probably very difficult to work and homeschool and then also manage putting so much effort um, into your children. What was the motivation do you for for being so active in that sense and not necessarily just kind of letting things flow?
I think for me, it was my family. So I failed to mention earlier that even though I'm an enrolled tribal member with the Coshada tribe, I share lineage with the Alabama Coshada tribe of Texas. So my father was a member there, and then when he met my mother, he disenrolled and then enrolled in the Coshada tribe. And we're a matrilineal society. So it was the choice of my parents to live here in the Kwasadi community or the Coshada tribe uh, area and grow up speaking the Kwasadi language. So even though my father came with more Alabama speaking or Alabama speaking background, they made the conscious choice to speak Kwasadi.
Mm,
Um, Now, for me, that's majority of what I speak. I am attempting to learn Alabama, but I would say my brother, who's 4 years older than me, he had more extensive, um, either he picked it up quite easier than I did, or he just was exposed to it more because he knows a lot more Alabama than I do. And so I found it within the last few years when I found out that um, the Alabama Coshada tribe was having language classes that I wanted to start learning. So I have taken a few classes, and even though it's within the Muskogean language family, the differences um, come with pronunciation or endings, and then sometimes entirely different words. And so I've enjoyed learning that. And um, so my dad passed. It's been 23 years now that he's passed, or it will be 20, or roughly around 23 years. And so um, having that, I still have family in Texas. And I have found that listening to their conversations in Texas, that I actually understand more than I realized. I'll miss a few words because they're just not the same. But um, taking that time to actually acknowledge, hey, I need to. I'm half of the Kwasadi and half of Alabama. I need to be able to um, actually find within myself, a piece of learning both sides because culturally, we've carried those things, but language wise or linguistically, I failed to meet that um, language acquisition, I guess. And I would say it wasn't my choice. It was just how we were brought up, and matrilineally, our father followed that, and so we learned through our mother's side, and so I'm more fluent. I'm definitely more fluent in Wasati, and I can understand a good bit of Alabama. So I didn't want that to be the case for my children. So I try to share with them as much knowledge and language as I can. Um, their language is fairly okay. It's not 100% fluent. They're still language learners, but we still work on it. And having the titles of Kashada Princess and Kashada Junior Princess within our family, they have strived even harder to continue the language learning and to push forth. And so, my Kashada Princess, my 17-year-old, she wants to run for Miss Indian World one day. And so one of the key things that she said was, Mom, I need to learn the language a lot better so that I can run for this title. I think that's her definition of saying to do Miss Indian World, I feel that I need to have a more level of fluency, which I find is very um, endearing on her part, but also I'm proud to hear them when they say, Mom, I want to know this word, or tell me how to say this, so it's not just me instilling in it. I think they also have the desire to learn, and they also see the need for it within our community because our young people, many of them don't speak, many of them don't understand, or do they have the resources within their own family. I Some of their parents are non-speakers, so they have to look elsewhere for their language education. And so I think at their age now, I think they find it to be more um, encouraging that they can find it within their own home. And I, as a youth, unfortunately, um, took it for granted. I
Mhm.
took it for granted for so many years because it was my first language, because Kosari was my first language, but I learned English slowly a little bit before kindergarten. So to put it in perspective, my brother, who I mentioned is 4 years older, when he went to kindergarten, he knew three words was yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and bathroom.
Mhm.
And at one time he forgot how to say bathroom. And so he told the teacher, or he raised his hand and she called on him, and he just kind of hopped out up and down and pointed in the direction of the bathroom. And she said, You can go. And so, but he quickly learned. And I feel like my English level was not very high as far as my other students. So during my time, we had to be tested into kindergarten. And so we got placed into certain classes. Well, the class I got placed in, I guess because of my language, um, because maybe I just didn't have enough English or knowledge, I was placed in the lowest class. But that quickly became um, the wrong class for me because I exceeded that, and then I became in so we had three classes. So the third being, I guess, maybe the lowest scoring, and then like you had your average, and then you had your higher scores. I quickly became an honor student and started learning um, English and history and all the things that you do in elementary. So I didn't, and the studies show now that if you have a language learner and they are attempting to learn English, they may test out or test very poorly to begin with, but because of that second language, or maybe it's a third language, they quickly rise to the occasion and will gain the knowledge very quickly. And, they can surpass those that um, were ahead of them at one time. So I know that through that, that's happened to me. And I, um, I just know that having the language, I appreciate it a lot more, especially because I have my own children and it is my responsibility as a mother, because our women were responsible for the education of their households and nieces and nephews as well, to help out with that, but to teach them the language, to teach them the traditions and the culture and all the things that would be taught at home in a traditional home setting as far as Kwasati ways. And so I fell into that naturally. I felt that desire and instinctual calling to teach the language and to teach the culture. Um, Even though I had trepidation because I was always fearful of teaching my kids the language wrong. But as I started teaching the language immersion classes, it didn't matter if I was teaching them incorrectly here or there. It could be corrected later instead of not teaching them at all. So there was a few years where I kind of was hesitant to teach them anything. But because I was asked to help teach the immersion class, that gave me the confidence and the understanding that it didn't matter as long as they were learning the language in some form, that those things could be correct, that those were minor, that those could be corrected later versus not having the language at all. Because, the older we get, it is harder to hear and to speak the language and have the correct pronunciation and accents. Or in our case, we have a lot of nasal sounds that we produce when we speak our words. And so the older they get, it's harder for them to make those certain sounds because our language is fully made of sounds. And so I'm thankful that my motherly instincts kicked in, and I really wanted to pursue that, or make sure that they knew who they were as Indigenous or Kwasati speaking and Kwasati peoples, and more recently to learn their Albamo side too, because that is who they are. They are part of that, and that's never going to be any different. Because no matter if they choose to continue with the culture and language, deep down, that is who they are.
I have a kind of off script question, but it feels like what I'm hearing is that you were like when you were growing up, you started off not knowing a lot of English when you went to school, growing up mostly immersed in Kawasati, and then later became an honor student. And then I'm also hearing this point where it was a choice to teach your children Kawasati, and you saw it as a responsibility to keep it forward. I feel like one of the things that I hear often on those two places is a feeling of external stress of, a lot of time I often hear that when people go to school, they face the adversity of only knowing one language and having to learn English quickly, and they decide um, at that point to fully switch into English and kind of move on with their lives outside of the language. And then I also hear from people that whenever they get to the point of choice, where what are they going to teach their children, sometimes mothers make the decision that it's better not to teach a language to the students, to their children, for a lot of reasons, but mostly out of love and protection. What I find interesting, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit, is that I'm not hearing either of those things within your story.
So I would say deep down, I understood and knew that the language loss was happening, and it was a topic of conversation within the community. Um, but in as as a young mother and a community member, I didn't feel like it was my role or responsibility, or I didn't feel like I had a place in that way to contribute to the community. And I
Mm,
was wrong because um, I got encouragement. I had a lot of great mentors, and they helped me understand or helped me realize just by watching and seeing and listening to them that I did have a lot to offer as far as language. So deep down, I gained that responsibility through understanding the need that needed to be filled because we are an endangered language. We have, we're still considered a small tribe within Indian country, and maybe not a small tribe within Louisiana because our numbers may be higher than some of the other federally recognized tribes or the state recognized tribes. But we've never reached 1,000 to my knowledge of tribal enrollment numbers, but um, we're about 950, give or take. That number changes periodically, so I haven't asked in the last couple months what the numbers are, but in that um, 950 or so approximately, we have under 200 speakers, and the speakers are at least 41 and older. That could be a little bit different depending on um, the age that I'm guessing. And so, and I knew this, and I knew it back in my day. I knew it when I went to kindergarten
mm,
because I spoke the language. I understood the language, and there were many of my tribal members that were either a year older or a year younger than me that I went to school with, and they didn't speak the language. They probably understood it very well. They wouldn't speak it back. And I found that was a result, which it's happened to me, but I guess I didn't take it the same way as some other tribal members. They got laughed at or they got corrected in such a way that they decided that they would not speak the language, even though they could understand it. Um, they just stopped. And so um, criticizing them was very detrimental. And then there was another time where I've heard in our tribal history that a lot of the parents were concerned about their children having a good education and having good careers or going to college would be difficult for them if they didn't learn English. So they integrated, and I was not part of that, but I had heard about it when I started the language immersion teaching, that they brought in someone to teach them English so that they'd be more proficient. And then later, I would say years later, they realized that that was detrimental to the Kosari language. And so that's when they began the Kosari language program, and they started seeking federal funding or funding to help with the beginning of a language program. And so for me, I would say that my thoughts and viewpoints have evolved over time because uh, and I would say it's probably based out of criticism and fear because even now, and I accept it because I'm still a learner. Like I said, I'm perpetually learning. I still get corrected from our elders. I may not say something correctly. They'll stop and say, "Hey, this is the correct way to say it," or "You should say it like this," or "This is how I would say it." So they give criticism, and you have your elders that give good constructive criticism, and then you have some that are more a little bit more critical, and so you have to learn to accept both sides and just thank them for the knowledge that they're offering or for the corrections because um I find myself that I'll have to stop and correct someone, and I want them to not feel that way. So in my language immersion teaching, I always erred on the side of um, being very compassionate and gentle with my teaching. And so um, a student may have not spoken it 100% correctly or 100% um, with the correct pronunciation. But and I would tell them, as long as I can understand you, I will answer you. And I may go back and say, hey, this is how you say it. But I never really did stop them and um, try to deconstruct what they said and make it in a negative way. I just kind of, accepted what they said because they are learning and they're doing their best because it's hard to learn the language and it's hard to teach the language. And so um, having that understanding made them feel less pressured on being 100% accurate or correct. And so, because our goal was to get them to speak conversationally. And in order to do so, we all have to make mistakes. And um, I let them make the mistakes. And in doing so, um, it built up their confidence. They weren't afraid to try. Because if I felt like if I were to criticize or break it down too many times, they would quit or they would stop trying because I seen that happen in my age group, and I didn't want to continue that um, kind of critical um, correction. I guess I didn't want to be so overly um, just you're saying it wrong, or make them feel bad for them trying because I want everyone to try, whether you're getting it right or not. You just need to try, and we can always work on fixing what's not working. And so I'm hoping that answers your question.
Mm. I feel like we can always work on fixing what's not working and like just having people try. Thank you. I'm sorry, this is not my interview, but I'm just like thinking
No, no,
that
go
was
ahead.
good. And like this idea of criticism being internal criticism being the the biggest and most important force. That's thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I guess because I can put myself in their shoes. Even though I spoke it at home, I spoke it with my grandparents, I spoke it with my parents, my siblings. I didn't necessarily have the venue to speak it outside of that setting. And so it also hindered me to not have other speakers my age. And
Mm-hmm.
so in language immersion, they recommend, well, I don't know if that's been updated, but you at least have 5 students or
Wow.
5 others, like a group of 5. And so I would have needed maybe 4 other speakers to be conversationally, and we grow up together and learn all the nuances and all the language um, I guess just even like joking in the language, just day to day with someone my age, because all of my language has been within the family unit, with, someone older than me, sometimes my siblings, my younger siblings. But um, I feel like there I'm lacking in some of the finer details or the eloquency of maybe an elder because I did not have those peers to springboard um, and just have everyday conversations with. And so I had, I want to say, 4 other tribal kids in my grade, and one of them, he was fluent, but he just wasn't a speaker. Like he just didn't talk in general. He just was a quiet person.
Quiet
And
person.
so, yes. And so, he still speaks today and he's fluent, but he just wasn't a talker. So, you could talk to him in either language, and I think he might say yes or no. But the other tribal members that were my age either didn't grow up speaking the language, or they could understand a good bit but not really um, could have a conversation in Kwasati. So I feel like knowing that, and then knowing that our language loss was happening, um, I think I tried to run from it for a little bit,
Hmm.
but knowing that because I thought, what can I do? How can I help my community? You know, because I don't have the level of fluency as some of these other people older than me. How can I contribute? But then I come to find out that you know, we have a lot of speakers, but not a lot of teachers, or not a lot of people that understand um, sentence structure or how to think linguistically. So I found myself in a very unique position that I could grasp the understanding of fluency levels, linguistic terminology, and how linguistics worked, and to be able to try and use that to teach. And so I found myself in a position of becoming a teacher after having so much doubt in myself. And so having those mentors and having encouraging um, people to work with helped me transition into saying, oh, you know, well, I'll just write this out for you. Sometimes somebody will say, hey, I need this translated. And sometimes I need help with it. And sometimes I can translate it on my own. Um, but, you know, it's always been probably in the back of my mind, knowing that, you know, our language is important, because I was taught, I was raised in a way that if you don't speak your language, you're not. Are you even considered an Indian, or are you considered Kosadi? And so that has they drilled that into me, and so that stuck with me. But having children and knowing the importance of them learning it, and you know, sharing it with others, um, I think really changed my definition on how I viewed and how I chose to go about um, being a tribal member, you know, giving back to the community in any way that I can, even if it's not perfect. So I think um, because you know, I've been criticized before, so I I don't I don't want to be my own stumbling block, and hopefully I can encourage others to also think and feel the same way I did, because we do have a lot of people that can understand the language my age, but you know, they only answer in English. So um and I don't want that to be perpetuated. Um and so I'm a very encouraging teacher if I can be. Um I just I hope that my and I hope my children feel that encouragement instead of being more critical than what I experienced.
You say that one of the main points of, you walking away from understanding that was understanding that that you understood both of these elements enough to become a teacher. What year was that when you came to that realization?
Well, the workshop was before 2017, and I took it for fun, took it just
Mhm.
for my own benefit. And then 2016, they said, hey, could you come help teach this language immersion class? We're having it during the summer. It's only for this many weeks, and we'll pay you, you know, for your time. And I thought, well, what can I teach them? But apparently, during the workshop, I was identified by an elder and the workshop um, instructor, saying, you know, the potential that they saw that I did not recognize at the time. And I don't know what it was, but that they saw. But I'm so very thankful, and have a lot of gratitude for them seeing the potential in me that at that time, not knowing what I know now, and not
Mhm.
feeling the way I feel about sharing and teaching. Um, because growing up, you know, I, from middle school to high school, we did travel around and teach or share with other schools as a student. I was, we would go and do school presentations or visit other places to share and represent our tribe. But, I didn't really have to speak to them. I didn't really, we were just there to demonstrate
Oh.
mostly dances.
Mhm.
And so, um, even though I could speak very well um, English and, present things in English, um, I guess I felt Wasati was so daunting. I guess because um, I thought somebody's listening, somebody's gonna criticize me, or I'm gonna say this wrong. And so then it kind of quickly fell into, well, let's not venture into that territory. And
Yeah.
so having encouraging mentors and people um, coming to me and say how much I helped them throughout the class, that really opened up my mind to thinking, oh, well, then I can do this, because I can further myself and learn as much as I can in ways of teaching the language and sharing it and instilling that in others. And so um, it's a very interesting for me. It's very personal to me because for me, it started off in such a negative way. And now um, I still have people that come to me and ask me, how do you say this? Or how would you word this? Or, um, and so to be identified personally to help someone has been very rewarding. And I'm grateful for having had that opportunity to, or have to been, um, actually someone believed in me. It's kind of ironic that, that I'm having to convince myself, oh, that I speak my own language, which I grew up with. It's very interesting. And I don't really share that a whole lot, but I think that would be relevant to this conversation.
Yeah. And I don't know, it makes me think about how much thought that person put in suggesting you. And like, was it something that they felt, or was it something that was very deep? But balancing that towards what a large impact it made for you as a person and your own language journey.
It did, because that turned into a much more larger knowledge base as far as like cultural knowledge of um, being on my way. I I say that I'm not a language bearer, but then sometimes I do. I flip flop between the two because I do carry a lot of knowledge, but then I also think, well, there's so much more people with more knowledge than me. Is it right for me to call myself a language bearer? But um, I can honestly say that at least I'm a language bearer, either in training or on my way to becoming a language bearer. But you know, even now, so many people come to me with language or cultural questions, and I'll just answer them, or on the spot. They'll say, "What's the history?" or just different random things that it might come up, and so then pull it out of my head and start speaking about it. So I guess just being very humble about it. I just, and that's the other thing. Like we as Kwasati people are very humble, and no one wants to be called an authority on anything, on any one subject or the language. They're always cautious of that. So, in that way, being Kwasati, I still find myself saying, "Oh well, I can speak the language, but I'm not a teacher or an expert." But um, when it comes down to it, I actually am. I find myself falling into those patterns of saying, yeah, maybe, but it's there. It's there, and it's continually growing, and I'm continually learning. So, and that's why I stress that this is always a journey that we're um, following, and never to stop learning.
Yeah.
So,
you're you you're coming to the realization that you are someone who knows more about language than maybe you know yourself. Um, for those who are not familiar with the Koasati language, you talked a little bit about where it was when you were growing up, but could you tell us just just give a summary of what is the current state of the language?
Okay, so we, of course, our Kwasati language isn't considered endangered because we have 200 or less speakers so out of maybe 950 tribal members. And so we are losing our elders at a much rapid rate than I remember ever seeing. So COVID didn't help, but also just our elders are of that age where it's their time. And so with their passing, we are losing entire dictionaries and encyclopedias full of knowledge, full of knowledge that pertains to specifically Kwasati culture, Kwasati language, and um, sometimes I've found that I or we have come across times where we do interviews or have just small discussions or we ask certain questions and sometimes something will come up and we'll say, well, how come you never said that before? And famous answer is because you never asked. And so I've learned to ask as many questions as I can think of in those settings, just because they're not either the question triggers a memory or a photo triggers the memory, or they're not going to overshare. They're just going to answer the question that is being asked. They're not going to elaborate as much as we would love for them to. They stay on topic. Um, and so I I love that when they say, "Well, you never asked," and so it could be years that I like when my grandmother was still around, I'd say, "Apple, you never told me that." She goes, "Well, you never asked." I'm like, "Okay, you're right. You're absolutely right." So, I learned that very quickly because it's a famous saying around here, and I um, I appreciate that because um, how are we going to know unless we ask the right questions? And so, going back to our language as a whole, most of our fluent speakers are, um, I'm saying 41, but could have the number wrong, but around the age of 41 and older, up to our elders' age. Through our language immersion program we had the summer of 2017, we had one young gentleman who went on to continue. He strived very hard to continue his language education. And so, Mr. Eli Langley, which I think you are familiar with, he went to Harvard and he fought for several years to allow him to use Kwasati as his language requirement. And so, that is our success story because he took the class. I was one of his teachers, and I know that on his diploma it says that he fulfilled his language requirements in the Kwasati language. So we had to, it was a struggle for him to get Harvard to accept that. But I think in doing so, he's paved the way for other indigenous groups to have their language also accepted. Because if they accepted our language, because there are no Kwasati language, I would say, um, professors at that level to be able to administer the testing that um, would be required for Harvard to accept. But we were able to use, sorry, I don't know if you could hear the horn. Okay. So we were able to use a linguist from William and Mary College, Mr. Jack Martin,
Yeah,
and
okay. Mhm.
an elder administered a written exam, and then our Dr. Martin administered the uh, written exam, and then our tribal elder administered the verbal testing. And so um, he it was a very extensive test, and so but according to Dr. Martin, he passed all the requirements that Harvard had required for him. So um, I would say that that success story, he still speaks, to my knowledge, Wasati as often as he can. I know he's pursuing his dreams and goals, but when he's home, he does speak to us in Kwasati. And during his journey, I know he went through a lot of visits with elders and would sit and speak to them in Kwasati and, ask them questions. And he used that to gain his fluency. And so I enjoyed seeing that. And we had a lot of other students that gained an even greater level of fluency. But some of them went off to college. We weren't able to continue, because language immersion is very intense. And so each day they were very, very tired, mentally, because it was a great ordeal as far as like from start to finish, because we didn't allow any English. And I know that we had each one was required to obtain a mentor or someone to go home and do homework with. So even though their day finished in the classroom, they still had more work to do. And I found that that program was very successful. We did it for another year into 2020. So that was 2017. I'm sorry, that was 2016. In 2017, we did it again. But that was the year I was hired. And so then I, I don't recall why we didn't continue that. But since then, I think what it was we were developing our grammar books and trying to work through what worked and what didn't work in our immersion school, um, and try to establish a better program. And so we were working on the backside of it. And then more recently, COVID, we had a lot of grant funding, we had a lot of plans, and then COVID happened, which derailed a great big portion of what we had planned. And then we had also changes in leadership.
Thank you for kind of giving me a sense of where the Kawasati language stands today. And you've touched a little bit about this, but I'd like to know like some of the highlights of the stuff that you feel like were really strong contributions or things that you felt that have happened within your language work that were a really good thing. I know it's very difficult, especially in a culture that prioritizes humility, to like talk about things that you feel were kind of tooting your own horn, but it's important for people to better understand from your perspective what are the things that feel like the most clear and true to what you want to accomplish that you felt like you got there with.
So one of the things I can highlight is in past years, and we haven't been doing that recently, but we had a language committee. And so the language committee consisted of a great many of our elders, and honestly anyone of any age was allowed to be part of the committee. So we had some youth, some, middle-aged tribal members, and anywhere in between. And I we got to meet regularly. And so that was one of the highlights, because um, we would make the agenda and we would decide, hey, this is what we want to discuss, or these are the words we're going to go through. And we would send them home with homework and say, look through these words, tell us what you know. Because most of the words that we did send them home were older words and words that were not commonly used today. And so whatever they could bring to the table. But it sparked a lot of, within our meetings, it would spark a lot of discussions about their memories, um, their language usage, and just a variety of things would come up in those meetings. And you would have a large group of maybe 30 to 40 elders that would come and meet. And they enjoyed coming to meet because a lot of times they would say, "Hey, if we're not meeting, because at our elder age, sometimes they don't get out as much, they don't have as much interaction, and so they enjoy the interaction, but they also very greatly appreciated having a a place to come and speak the language with one another, use words that they don't use normally. Because sometimes you'll hear us speak um, Kossari words and then mix in with English words. And I hear it more and more, but it's been commonplace, or we shorten words. And I we call them slang words, but it's basically the same word, but we just kind of shortened it to a quicker way of saying it. And I myself have trying to personally get back to saying things the proper way and not shortening them. But seeing them get together, and over the years, since we haven't had them, many of them have passed on. So that's kind of sad in a way, because we're losing so much with each passing. But having the memories of them sitting and having side discussions. So you might have a group at each part of the room having a discussion, and eavesdropping, or going to each one and saying, "Hey, what are your thoughts on this?" And they'll tell us, and it worked really well, just because they could bounce things off of one another and speak with one another, and they did not feel like they were the one person, being the authority in saying, "This is what this word means," or "This is what traditional knowledge goes with this word." They didn't feel like that. They felt like it was a collective voice, and so it worked very well in that manner. And so with our language committee, it transitioned to the language and cultural committee, because when we began using Mukatu, which we have that, um, it's not live yet, but we have that capability of using Mukatu. We transitioned it to the cultural language and cultural committee, just because you really can't separate the two. There are so many aspects of our language is tied into the culture, and vice versa. And so we told them of the transition. No one batted an eye, and they continued working as they were, because sometimes it got into plants, and what are the words for these plants, and then saying, "What do you remember about using these plants?" Or different types of topics that they would bring up. And sometimes we would have to, sometimes they didn't know the English word for it. And so sometimes we'd have to do our very best to like source pictures and say, "Is this what you're talking about?" Or they would describe it to us, and we'd have to do our best to like pull it up on our phone and say, "Is this the nut you're talking about? Is this the flower you're talking about?" Um, and trying to track down, because sometimes they had the language knowledge, but they didn't have the English or scientific knowledge to go with it. They just knew the traditional knowledge. So working with them has been one of the highlights for me. I think that stands out the most.
Yeah, that's hard to look at, as that makes the pain of losing them more acute. I'm understanding of just, how deeply involved you are with this group, not just once or twice, but every week, it felt like. Yeah.
Right. And, just to see their appreciation for um, having a place to come and meet, but also the appreciation of being asked and to be part of something bigger. They may not say it, but you can see how much enjoyment it brought to them, and they looked forward to it every time we had a meeting. I hope that one day that we can get back to that, and see our elders come together again to share the knowledge and culture. So um, and then also, um, I would like to see our elders and youth come together,
Mm.
to lean on each other, um, to find ways to bridge the gaps to that. Um, we don't have very many programs for that. We've had some in the ways of the language immersion where they had to find a youth had to find an elder to work with and be their mentor, and that to me was more meaningful for both parts of the elder youth combination, just because um, they learn so much just from the intimate conversations, whether it be memories or um, sharing stories, whatever it was that they had. I don't think um, the students would forget those types of interactions.
Like making these happen are very difficult but so meaningful.
Yes. And I'm trying to think of anything else that would highlight my work, because I've done a various number of things, not just language, but with archaeology, NAGPRA.
Police
So
department.
yes,
Yep.
and I guess too, I think one of the most recent things that I've seen was because my daughters are travel royalty. Um, them introducing themselves and speaking the language and then translating that has been very meaningful. And we continually work on their knowledge base as far as language to be able to say more and speak more as they're going around being travel ambassadors.
Mm-hmm.
And um, just out of respect for the Alabama side, when we went to the um, I think it was May. Is it this month? No, I think it was April. April. Um, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, it was earlier this month in May. There was a benefit powwow at the Alabama Coshada Tribe of Texas, and I had told them, look, I don't know enough Alabama, but I'm going to help you, and we're going to formulate an introduction out of respect for that tribal nation and of your heritage. So, my daughter, who's the Shada princess, she was able to speak the Alabama first, then the Kwasati, and then speak the English translation. And that was a proud moment for me. That was a big highlight because using what I've taught her and using um, what she's learned over the years and learning new things and incorporating it into her introduction. um, I saw people kind of like stop and look because she said it in 3 different languages in one introduction. And for me as a parent, and me and my husband were like, wow, she just did that, and not that she couldn't do that, but you hear it and you see it in action, and you see them using it, and you see the junior princess, she will go and say her little introduction. It includes like what her clan is, what she's representing, um, her name, all the important things that come with the introduction. And then she might add a little bit extra, or they both do. And so it's very meaningful to see that they're taking what they're learning and putting it and using it in a public setting like that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and also it feels, as someone who cared so much about both the language and your children, to see like there's almost like a sibling, like that your children also care about the language too. It's got to feel really good.
they do, because most recently they came back from one of their youth meetings and said, "Look, we are lacking with the resources to become fluent speakers. Can y'all do that?" Because as a family, we talked about doing it at home through Zoom, because I have nieces that live in Baton Rouge and New Orleans. And so, and then some here, we're all kind of spread out. And so we were talking about using Zoom as a venue to do our own language classes and then get good at that to be able to open it up to community members to like develop our own program, or to develop, um, whatever what are they called? Can't think of the word now. Kind of workbook type or just kind of curriculum. That's the word I'm looking for, to
Okay,
develop some curriculum. Yes. And so, and we're hearing more and more, my girls have been talking about that, and all my kids were on board. They were all very excited. They all wanted to be part of it. They all wanted to get it up and running, and we said, well, look, this is something that has been gifted to you as a burden. So, you carry that burden, you come up with ideas, you come up with what you want to see, your goals, and us as language speakers, because it would be myself, and my brother and anyone else in the family that's willing to contribute, we would be the ones to help y'all along the way and teach y'all. But we want to see y'all teach it, or y'all be the people to initiate these types of conversations and discussions and learning space. And so, I think they're still in the process of developing that, but they haven't let it go, because they were like, when are we going to do this? Or when? So, as a child, they just want to jump right into it. And I'm over here thinking of all the logistical part. And I think maybe we just need to jump into it. Because
I
even my
know.
niece, my niece is like, when are we doing language classes? We need it. We need it. And I'm like, yes, but it's also to find the time for everyone to be able to attend. And so I think we just need to set it and just do it, and then it'll work itself out. Because I'm a planner.
It
I'm a
feels like
planner.
that's the reason why, like, for me, that feels like why intergenerational connection is so important, because like you sometimes you just need to listen to the youth who are just like, let's just go. And it's like, oh, but there's so many
Yes.
things we need to pack and get together. And it's like, you know what if we just went?
Yes. And I think that's probably what will happen is we're just gonna have to dive right in and let itself work. All the little details will work itself out.
Yeah, have them get on trying to find a time for it and like make it their responsibility.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of Zoom. I know COVID was a very dark time for all of us, but COVID has had its benefits, because now we have Zoom, we have, virtual spaces to be able to do things like this, and for us to have this interview here, so, it wouldn't have been easy for me to travel all the way down to where you are, it would have took a few hours.
Yeah.
So, there's a few benefits to having um, technology up and going, and spaces, and just different things. So we want to utilize that to the best of our ability.
And that kind of brings me, we're getting close, man. I think we're getting close to all of the questions that we need to cover. But one of the things that you just mentioned is that how technology has made things easier. But are there any other things that would make your work in carrying the language forward easier?
For me, feel like we could use a lot more help as far as, so, as I spoke before, I was a hesitant person to teach the language. I think if we could find more of our tribal people to, we all face the same challenges as groups, but um, to find someone confident, or we could build that confidence, say, hey, look, you may not have all the language skills you need or have all the fluency, but if you're willing to teach, we can help you teach. And so one of our biggest challenges here at Coshada is finding teachers. We have a lot of speakers in the way of elders and middle age, but not many of them want to be that authority and say, hey, I'm willing to teach. And
Mm,
so then it falls to someone my age, or someone with um, the desire or the willingness to step up and say, hey, I'll go ahead and do it. Even if I'm not fully equipped, I'll go ahead and do it.
mm,
And so, and it's all about resiliency. It's all about community support. It's all about getting what we can or as much information as we can from our elders while they're still here. It's all about holding to our traditional values of leaning on one another and being a community and supporting each other. And so I think if we could find more like-minded people to become teachers, I think we've had a few that have stepped up, and then whether it be their um, physical health that have pulled them away, or other factors that have pulled them away. If we could just get some really motivated individuals to become teachers and to stick it out, because I mean it can get difficult to be a language teacher because there's so many things, so many parts to teaching that most people don't consider. And
Okay, we're ready. Go.
okay,
So we were.
so go ahead. I had my thought and then it left.
We were talking about generally what would make things easier with you within your work. And one of the things that you were talking about is the need for more people to step up and teach. And one of the things that was very difficult with that is that people feel like they need to be perfect before they come into teaching. And what you would find more helpful is if people were willing to learn. And I was getting the sense that it was, you were talking about, there was a sense of grace that you would want.
Yes, I had a very great thought before the Zoom cut out on me. But in essence, I would just say that I just had the thought of maybe we need to step up and develop some workshops on teaching, have our own because each language group is going to be different and how they approach their language teaching and um, how language is learned. So I'm wondering if maybe um, if we stepped in and said, "Hey, if you're have even the slightest bit of interest, let's help you develop your skills, your confidence level." We've had um, we've had classes, um, and we've had various teachers, and they all approach it from different ways. But what we were developing was having a very unified way of teaching and having it where we had our own grammar books and our own textbooks to follow so that anyone could pick up the textbook and say, hey, this is what we're learning. So kind of a guide to teaching. Because a lot of our young people nowadays, they whether they're auditory learners or they're hands-on learners or tactile, I think they seem to have that definition of what class is going to be like. So they want a textbook, they want actual handouts, and sometimes um, we did have a combination of all three. Sometimes we had just auditory lessons, then sometimes we had handouts, and then sometimes we had flashcards. Sometimes we had um, kind of that um, visual learning. Then some of it was movement learning. I forgot what it's called. But we would use different methods in our immersion. Um, and we've discussed going to different workshops throughout the U.S. or Indian country where they have language revitalization workshops to learn, because it's always evolving and changing. Not that the way we learn our language, but new methods that might be more helpful or useful. Um, is that something that y'all have found? Like, is Is the way teaching evolving and um, that you could learn a lot more from others, or is it more based on traditional viewpoints?
My opinion, well, like the way things are ordered really depends on the language. And so, what is being taught and the curriculum rise, it's really difficult to communicate that outside of language families. But I think Muskogean language families, it would be great if we could do more together to understand, because I mean, there's some complexities of grammar and how to bring people into that would be helpful for, us to get together and learn from each other. I feel like I'm not a curriculum expert, but what I sense is the most important thing is a relationship, or establishing a relationship between the teacher and the student that includes a gifting of the language in a meaningful and culturally connected way. So it's not necessarily just the knowledge of the language, but there's also kind of this relational acceptance that's being passed that's also has a bit of responsibility in it. And I feel like some like different methods and modes of learning are very important, but um, I think they're going to be most effective, and it's going to be best for generational learning if that's not forgotten in the process, personally.
I would agree with that. There's so many approaches as far as how to go about it within our own community, because the majority of us were taught from birth,
Mm-hmm.
and so no, there's no guideline on how do
No.
you teach this. So I think in the past they have done some trial and error type programs. Some things worked, some things didn't, but um, you know, it doesn't hurt to try, and you may land on something that is really outstanding or something that is just more of a, a fun type of learning style or a fun type of learning engagement that you may not use again. But I think what I would hope and aspire to is identifying others who have the same goals and the same um, heartfelt desires to see this language continue to be spoken and thrive.
Have you attended or thought about attending CoLang, collaborative language workshop?
I feel like I have, and it's been a while. And I think the challenge for me was because of my transition away from specifically language instruction, kind of pulled me away in different directions. And so I'm in the archival position, but it kind of branches out into so many avenues that I do still work with the language, here and there. It's just not a consistent um, path at the moment. Um, Now, that's not to say that I care any less about it. I just, we would need someone, I think, fully dedicated on a full time basis to be able to do that. And I don't mind helping and assisting or guiding, but I think we just need someone dedicated for that position.
It's a
And
full job.
it is, it's a full time job because working on curriculum building, working on lesson planning, because you might work, I don't know, a whole week on your material and you go to class the first day and you go through the entire week of material that you worked on in that first lesson. You know, it's a constant battle of making sure you have meaningful, engaging information and resources for your students. So I think that anyone interested and anyone in this realm of indigenous language teaching and curriculum building, programming, whatever it may be, that you have to love what you do. You have to have that spirit guiding you of, I'm doing this for my people. I'm not doing it just for me. I'm not doing it for the recognition. I'm doing this because I care about my people and I care about this language, and I want to see it continue. And that's how I mainly focus on all of our cultural based programming, any of our language, any of our events, any of our outside events when we go to schools. That's how I view it. I'm representing our tribe as one person, but I'm bringing with me what knowledge that I have that I can share, that I am proud of, but also want people to know that there is still the Coshada tribe of Louisiana here in this small town, because we can have um, people from 30 miles down the road say, we didn't know there was a Native American tribe just 30 minutes away. And you know, the fact that we want to instill in people that we're still here. We still have a language, we still have a culture, we still have traditions that we still practice today, that we're still here. That is usually our main message overall when we speak to outside groups. Um, and and almost sometimes internally, because we want to make sure that our young people and our elders, well, not so much our elders, but our young people understand the idea that, you know, they may live in a modern world, they may go to school and learn um, Western education, but you still have ties to a culture with identity, with languages, with traditions, customs. And so I see that a lot of our students that grow up either here or even outside of the community, maybe they live in Texas or somewhere in another state, they don't start having that interest in the language until they become an adult themselves.
Mm.
It's interesting to see that uh, um, you know, I'll get requests saying, "Oh, I want language material," you know, and they may not have access to it, but you know, through Mukitu, we're hoping to have access to tribal members here and throughout the U.S. And then currently, we're working on a language app. Now, that language app is going to be based on um, more, I guess, younger kids, maybe preschool to early elementary. But that's where we wanted to start because we had goals for language nests, and we haven't been able to develop those full-time language nests because of we don't have actually buildings dedicated for that. I think they're working on making an education building or a resource center, but we don't have that currently. And so after doing that, I'm hoping that maybe we can develop the language nest. But right now, it's still in the planning stages. I don't. They haven't broke ground on that yet. And so hopefully, you know, having a place and having the possibility of a language nest that we can develop them from birth and continue on to Little Indian School, and hopefully by then we'll have either comprehensive language programs so that when they get to elementary, they can still meet with the tribal department to continue their language education. Hopefully, you know, that would incorporate teaching the parents as well, because sometimes we have non-tribal parents that can't enforce or can't teach the language themselves because they're non-tribal. And so giving them also the resources, because they are tied to the tribe through their children, you know, it's important for the parents to also learn the language, because some of them, the majority of them, may not know the language. So we're hoping the language app, I don't know when that will be debuted, but we're working on re-recording some of the words, because their recommendation now we have a lot of our words recorded. We have our dictionary, and every word in the dictionary is recorded, but they recommended a speaker that was male, female, and a child or a youth, so that they can hear the differences in how the word is said. And it's an interactive app. It would tell the stories. It would have quizzes and games and songs. So we're hoping when that rolls out that that will kind of kickstart some interest, and from there we can slowly build on more apps or more classes, more programming. But we had to start somewhere, and since COVID, we have lost a lot of traction. And I think this was our way of entering that again and trying to get the momentum building to have more attention brought to language teaching and acquisition, and hopefully give something in their hands that they can have and work on at home as well, not just here within the department, but at home or on the go anytime that they want to better use it. So I think that was all for that.
In like in the fact that, making sure that language is available for people, one of the things that you mentioned was that you're motivated to do this because you're trying to do a community good. Could you describe a little bit more of where do you find inspiration within your own language work?
How do you find inspiration in our elders and in our youth? I think here listening to the elders, I enjoy listening to them pray. There's such an eloquence, and um, it's different than just normal conversation. And it's so beautiful to hear them pray. And I don't feel that I have that eloquence. I can pray in the language, but they have just a way about speaking and saying things in such a profound way that it's very moving. And I feel that, not having had that, um, I guess, peer base growing up in the language, not having anyone to grow up with speaking as far as like my age group, that may have hindered that. Um, because um, I don't know, I feel like I've missed out on a few things because of that. But um, that's something that I think I gradually am picking up on, just different way of speaking. I don't know. It's just different in terms of prayer, and I find a lot of inspiration in that. And then we have our elder groups that meet, and so one of our elder groups, and it's not just consistent of elders or consist of elders. It's our Pine Needle Basket Sewing group. And they meet weekly. They meet every Wednesday, and every third Wednesday, we host them here at our department. And so, of course, we make sure they're well taken care of. They have breakfast and lunch, and we take care of them while they're here, and they just enjoy spending the time here. They visit, they sew, and you can hear the language spoken throughout. And so, whether I'm included in the conversations or not, I'm within earshot of them. And so, those types of things are very inspiring, and I don't want that to go away. And so we do have a few young people that come, some in their 30s, some in their teens, that will come. And we don't have very many, but I'd like to see that. And they don't teach. They stress that it's just it's a gathering. They want to come sew and enjoy each other's company, discuss the highlights of their day or their week, or just community events, whatever it may be. And they just enjoy having someone to sit with and to sew. And that's how much, or how it was growing up. You would see some of these women go to a person's house they would sew late into the night, and then the next night they might go to the other person's house. So they would rotate houses, and somebody would host them, and they would just sit and visit, drink coffee, sew baskets, maybe have cookies or whatever. But just having that sense of community and belonging and being able to be present in those moments is inspiring. But then seeing our youth become involved or become interested in different ways. It may be through the youth group, or it may be through, like, say, my daughters, and they are representing the tribe, or they are wanting to form their own group and teach, through Zoom. So those things inspire me because, um, the work's not done. I don't think it'll ever be done, but there's still always someone motivated or pushing me, because sometimes I may get a little um, exhausted at times in my work and think, I don't know if I can do this. And then something will happen, and then I get really excited and motivated and say, okay, yes, this is necessary. I know why I'm doing this. I have to remember the reason why, I started my position with the tribe, and um, lean on that to keep me moving forward. Because sometimes we do, it is very exhausting and tiring, and I hope that others who do feel the same, that, someone out there appreciates it, and seeing and hearing, um, and being encouraged to speak the language, or having them appreciate me speaking the language. Let's say to the elders, I'll speak to them because they know can understand and speak back to them. So, having that practice of engaging with them, and then turning around and taking what I might learn or what I know and teaching a young person. So those are the two main inspiring ones that I find. But also, my children inspire me because I want them to be better than I was, or better than I am, and to not have the same um, roadblocks I had in my ways of thinking. So I've done my best to instill in them not to have those um, negative thoughts, or kind of like discouragements that I may have seen. I've done my best to prevent those things for them.
That's got to feel good and be so difficult to like do, in practice.
I try not to think about the difficult parts. I just, there's some things I may not know. So I'll have to turn around and ask someone older than me, or ask someone um, who might have the answer, So, and my children understand that too. They'll say, "What about this?" And I'll say, "I'll have to find out," and they accept that, and it all goes back to, as I say, we're continually learning, and we never stop learning. So, I think being honest with them and not trying to come up with answer and just trying to get by with saying, "Oh, this," or that, and just being honest and saying, "Look, I'll have to find out," and they wait for a response. May not be that day, it may be a week later, but I'll be like, "Oh, by the way, this is what I learned."
Yeah, just modeling the unknown. So
Yes,
accepting the unknown, so hard.
correct. Yes.
Well, the next question is very hypothetical. We're all limited in time and our ability to do things. If there were three of you, if there were three Raynellas, what would you have those three Raynellas doing?
I think if there was three of me, because of how I view things and how I've learned things, I think that I could accomplish three times as many things, just because um, I'm always multitasking and I'm not giving my full attention to one task
Mm-hmm.
fully. So it has to be divided up. So if I could focus on, let's, if we're, since we're speaking about language, if I could be, one would be a teacher, one's on the back end of developing the curriculum, and the other one's working with the students, and all combined efforts, having that same mindset and on being on the same page and seeing the vision, because not everyone can see the vision that you would, but if you had someone similar or like-minded, I think the flow of teaching would be so much easier. But
Mm.
in terms of, we're all different, we're all special, we're all um, meant for a purpose, and but taking those combined efforts and learning how to work with one another is something that we have to do as human beings. And so, I teach my kids, you're going to always meet someone a lot different than you. Or, with a different background. You accept those things, and you share with them, you be a good role model, be a good friend if that's what you choose. But, just having that balance. So, I, of course, I would love to have someone exactly like me three times over, but you know, it's just, in reality, we all have something to give. We're all special and unique. And so that would be unfair if there were three of me, But I do love your question because that gets me thinking, what could I accomplish? And I think I could accomplish a lot if I could divide myself two times over. But um, culturally, it would be beneficial. But also, I just, you know, I don't really have a good answer for you on that one.
It's not a trick question. It's just a thought.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
similarly, very similarly, a question of if you had three interns, three students that were being paid to work with you, that were looking to learn from you and do something, what would you set those three interns upon?
I would actually have them shadow me for a bit and kind of learn how to be respectful to the elders, because sometimes our young people lack the understanding or the discipline to interact with the elders. Sometimes, we were taught, you acknowledge them, you shake their hand, you say hello, you know, you enter the room and that's what you do. And, or you make sure they have their needs met, whether it be coffee or water, to ask them, hey, would you care for some coffee or water? Which is a common practice when I was growing up, but that has become less and less. And so, shadow me, learn and watch how I interact with them, and then kind of go through the interaction with them, because they may not automatically see, the little things that are being done or taught. Because in my age, I was taught, they showed you one time and you better have been paying attention. And if you didn't pay attention, then you were going to get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So, um, and I struggled with that because, like, my attention is like so many different like in so many different areas. And, I didn't have trouble focusing in school or focusing, but sometimes, um, now, because I have so many responsibilities, I feel like I'm getting pulled. And so if I could teach them to shadow me and kind of guide them, mentor them in that way, and then move on to, this is how you speak to them, you interact with them. These are questions you could ask. Then also on the backside of that, say, if you're wanting to teach, this is my method of teaching. How could you use what I would do, either to continue it, to improve it, or to find a new way? Because we all have different thinking and learning styles, and that may be something I missed as far as like, oh, I'm trying to teach it this way. But maybe if it's explained this way, more students would understand. And it's like that with, a lot of that is based on my children because I'll explain something to one or two children and they don't get it. And then I'll try to re explain it. And then either my husband or an older sibling will come in and say it either more simply or just differently. And they're like, oh, yeah, I get that. So, my way isn't always a perfect way. I do my best, but um, I feel like I'm very understood. But then, you get a kid and they may not understand what I'm trying to say. So I think just to learn, have that willingness to learn, and me teach them the skills that could grow them potentially to become language teachers, language program managers, coordinators, revitalization experts, whatever it may be, that they take what I provide and they expand on it themselves, and maybe they can teach me as well along the way. So if I had three interns, I would hope that they would take it to heart and appreciate the value of traditional knowledge, um, language knowledge, and um, have the mind to be compassionate in their ways of sharing and teaching as well.
Mm. And the last question we have is thinking about language groups. Coasati is one language group. There are a lot of other language groups that are out there and doing stuff. Um, could you describe what is your relation to other language groups yeah, that currently? And then the next question is if more language groups were to interact more and help each other more, what kind of support do you think would be helpful? Or if you knew from other groups, how could people support you in your work with other teams?
Okay. So for me, I don't have any current, or we don't have any current um, working relationships um, with other groups, other than the group that we just started with members of Tulane. And we also have, I think you're on the committee. We have the Alabama Kashada. We have the Dina Band of Choctaws. We also have the Tunica Biloxis. And all of those groups have come together recently and they are working on formulating a committee. So this, at the current moment, that's the only group. And we don't have a name yet. It's in progress as far as selecting a name, but we have become a large group, as I can tell, from the various meetings we've had. So, and I think the homeless, y'all part of that group. So I think any of the language groups that are interested within the state of Louisiana and Texas or nearby, or that have, I actually don't know how it was, you know, how we were all brought together. I just know that I was invited, and um, hearing others and their challenges, hearing their successes, um, kind of helps and motivates me to continue this work as well, but also cheer others on to learn from the other groups and hopefully develop stronger ties and relationships with each other, because we are facing the same challenges. Our languages may not be the same, but if we lean on each other, support one another, I think we could find great success in being cheerleaders for one another and just being support. And even if there's not much you can do, but knowing that you have people behind you rooting for you and providing what they can, whether it be a phone call or like this interview or a chance to speak at a conference and those types of things, to help build the understanding, the knowledge base, to build up each other in whatever way we can. And I'm trying to think what the rest of your question was.
I think that was, so it was, what groups are you connected with, which is kind of that Southeastern Language Committee, and then talking about what support looks like, which sounds like that uplifting element.
So yes, I can add one other thing about the Southeastern Language Committee that, we're still, I guess, in the beginning stages of developing a group, but connecting with others. It's helped me connect with the Alabama Coshawta Tribal language group as well, because their language is the closely connected language as far as it, it's still within the Muskogean family, but like they're the ones that I have greater connection with personally, but also language based. A lot of our words are quite similar, um, and it's just spoken a little bit differently. And there are a few words that I completely don't understand, but I am learning and willing to learn. But it's helped me make connections with um, them, and it's made it easier. So when I've gone to Texas for different events, it's I can say hello to them without being like, "Hey, I know you because I've seen your name or I've seen you present here or there." We actually developed, these stronger bonds or connections because we have the same goals and same challenges, same types of wishes for our tribal groups. So I think this also helped me connect with you. And um, I think it's been years that you had come to visit um, the tribe, and we had a big group discussion. But I never asked if you even remembered me. But it's funny because I say that because there's only one me. There's only one Raynella. If you say my name, it's like, oh yeah, there's like, I mean, I'm sure there are more out there. I know there's more out there, but like when they say me, my name is, it's just me, So, um,
I think
but it's helped.
I also met you at ATOM one year, I believe. I think.
Yes, yes. And so, you never know. You meet so many people sometimes in the work that we do that you never know if they walk away like, I forgot that person, or I forgot their name, or I might remember their face but maybe not their name, or the other way around. But um I think having that Southeastern Language Committee, or the beginnings of a committee, have instilled and deepened the relationships that are developing, or that could develop, or that were kind of more, we were just um, not necessarily friends, but we were, I can't think of the word, starts with a C.
Colleagues.
Yeah, colleagues is one of them, but like, I'm trying to think.
Oh,
Oh,
hmm.
oh, it'll come to me later, but just kind of mainly saying that, um, deepening the relationships. We might have met at an event here and it was very short or brief, and maybe we talked about language in our work within our communities, and that ended there and it didn't continue. But having this committee, I feel like, has broadened that in a great many ways, and we can actually get to know each other, get to know the work that each of us are doing, and to share and to uplift each other in such a meaningful way. Because we all need that.
Mhm. I'm so excited about that committee also, and I feel very similarly where it's like we all we knew of each other and we knew of the work, but
Yes.
there wasn't necessarily um, a way of connecting that didn't feel task based. and it's really
Right.
nice to have the committee where it's like we just are trying to, like, very low stakes. Just we want to know each other better, and maybe that'll turn into something, or maybe not. But just we need to understand each other, and that feels really good to be a part of. And I'm glad I was
Right.
able to connect with you and so many others through this.
I agree. Because I probably wouldn't have met as many people as I would have had I not gone to Tulane and presented with our co-presenters. Um, because, I just got invited, you know, and I was thinking, there's no one else to present. Let me go do it. I'll do it. And then it was such a much more meaningful experience than when I walked in and thought, okay, this is it. I guess the event and the way they presented everything, it was very heartfelt, and you
Mhm.
could see that the other groups, like the Choctaw groups, um, they put their heart and soul into their presentations and their work, and um, just like we do. But to see others openly share it and be proud of it kind of also helps. Just we're proud of our language, we're proud of who we are, but sometimes you don't have the right venue to express that. And so that was a great way and a great place to express ourselves openly, honestly, with like-minded people. And so I think that was very refreshing and a very good way to start off the committee and the year, and hopefully, we'll get to do more events like that. And maybe I know they talked about going to each community and doing a little bit something there here and there and get to know one another. And we are, I mean, demographically, we are small groups compared, to everyone as a whole. So why not support one another, and why not be um, able to share just teachings, as far as like how to teach languages, or what worked for you, what didn't work. So those types of things are something that I'm excited to gain and to share with them as well.
And I feel like I'm also excited to share in other people's successes. Like, what people do within languages is so difficult and so complex. And when you do something and it works and it makes a change, it's incredibly thrilling and exciting. And then you turn to tell someone about it, and then it's like, wow, you don't understand how cool this is,
Yeah, or you think you get it, you totally get it. It's just being on the same page, or having that same uh, like-minded individual, and you're like, okay, you totally understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and just, being able to share. I feel like sharing in the victories and the sorrows helps us do this work in a stronger and more meaningful way. It gives us some durability for the marathon.
I think so. I agree. I know it encourages me, helps me. And
Renella,
it's
this
good
is,
to know that. Oh, I'm sorry.
oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was just trying to finish up. My thought was, um, it encouraged me to know that I'm not the only one going through those types of thoughts, or struggles, challenges, but also to know that somebody gets me. Somebody is out there that is doing the same work and fighting for the same things, and just hoping that we all will succeed.
Being part of a community that's beyond the work. Um,
Yes.
I want to thank you for your time. I think that was all of my questions for today for this interview. Is there anything that is still on your mind or heart that we haven't covered that you want to say or express or talk about?
I don't believe I do. I'm looking through some notes, but I think I think I've covered them. So I can't think of anything.
It's been an honor to sit and listen to all of the work that you've done. Thank you so much for answering this call and agreeing to be with this interview. And also thank you for taking the time that you did. I mean, I feel like it's very easy to rush through these things and do them very quickly, but it was I I feel very graced and honored that um, you were willing to spend the time to give these full and complete answers to some of these questions. And I I feel like I need to go and sit for another few hours just to think, just to digest what I've heard today. But I thank you for I've already immediately learned so much and have so many um, you've inspired me greatly through this conversation, and thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're welcome, and I'm honored that you asked me to be part of this. And your questions were really very well thought out, and it had me thinking and kind of diving deep within me to be able to answer them, and to give them the full response was just even eye opening for me because some things may have triggered something either like dormant or something I never considered. So I mean, this was both meaningful and appreciative on my behalf as well. So I do appreciate the work that you were doing, and I appreciate being invited to speak with you about these topics. And I know we both have language near and dear to our heart. So I know you understand. A lot of the things that we spoke about in a more um, deep on a deep level that maybe not everyone feels the same way, but I know you do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for trusting me with your story and also being willing to share your story to the general public that's out there that's going to be hearing this. So I
Well,
think
absolutely. I hope they enjoyed as well.
I think with that we're gonna close the interview. So without further ado,
Okay.
Ralph, let me stop the recording.